In front of us are the thoughts of our hero. He lives a life like a dream, where everything he has experienced is right in front of his eyes, as if it just happened yesterday. But what we are about to see is what happened before. Our hero was a knight, strong and brave, fighting an opponent with all his might. He enjoyed the battle, finding pleasure in the fight. The enemy seemed slow and he was having fun until something ruined his focus. That something was his problem, distraction. It had always been an issue for him. He just wanted to play around, perhaps out of boredom, and lost his concentration. His armor, once strong, began to break after a powerful blow. It was frustrating because he expected it. Suddenly he was soaring through the air, facing a creature that resembled a serpent or even a dragon. Anger was another challenge for him. He got angry easily, and it affected his decisions. In that moment his anger drove him to strike at the serpent with his fists. It wasn't like him, but he enjoyed the feeling of strength surging through his body. Grabbing his sword, he beheaded the serpent. Swinging his sword felt powerful and magical, but he didn't like the idea of dying, not at all. You see, he had a secret, and in that moment he blinked his eyes open again. A woman stood before him. Did he dream her up? Was she really there? She leaned in and kissed him gently, a morning greeting. Her touch was soothing and he admired her beauty. Did she watch him all along? He couldn't hold back his feelings anymore. He wanted to kiss her. But then something unexpected hit him. He was just a baby. Tears filled his eyes as he cried. His mother thought he was hungry, but he cried because he was wearing new clothes. This twist in his life surprised him. The past life was changing again. He had died before, but here he was, reborn. It was like a never-ending cycle of life and death over and over. But eating made him feel better. He realized there was no reason to be sad or upset. It was his 101st birth after all, a milestone to celebrate. Before him, memories began to flash. His life as a student, a knight, even a samurai. And then he remembered his first life in Korea, as a person named Adam. Job searches and interviews filled his days. A mundane life with an unexpected end. A sudden collision with a car. Once upon a time he was reborn for the first time. Upon waking up he found himself in the body of an infant in a totally unfamiliar family. Everything felt alien. He was in a grand chamber surrounded by opulent tapestries and furniture that seemed to belong to a different era. From then on, he began to be reborn again and again. It was like living through a never-ending loop of lives. Surprisingly, he landed in different worlds and eras, each unique in its own way. But no matter where he was, the scenario of his life repeated itself with eerie similarity. He didn't have much to boast about. He had gotten used to this repeating cycle of birth, growth, and eventual death. The rebirth that many dream of had become ordinary for him. The anticipation and uncertainty of each new life had faded. While he was drinking his milk, he gazed around, wondering where he had ended up this time. The room was adorned with torches, and the architecture hinted at the Middle Ages, yet it didn't quite match any historical period he knew of. This wasn't Earth, at least not any Earth he had learned about. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. If you could reincarnate, what would your profession be? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now back to the recap. The new environment didn't discourage him. He had become accustomed to adapting. It didn't make logical sense. Was he reborn in another world? Different time, different culture? He didn't complain though. In fact, he found himself looking forward to these transitions. He actually liked these other worlds. They were usually more comfortable. This time, as he glanced around, he noticed luxurious draperies and servants bustling about attending to various tasks. Wealth and privilege surrounded him. He seemed to be born rich this time, even with plenty of companions. That meant he was from a noble family, and his mother adored him. Her eyes held a mix of exhaustion and affection as she looked at him. At first he couldn't understand their language, but after a while he got used to it. The strange words slowly formed meaning in his mind. New worlds and new languages often confused him at first, but the warm hands and loving gaze of his mother spoke volumes. She truly loved him. He had experienced 100 different mothers, so he knew which ones cared and which ones didn't. Sometimes he was abandoned right after birth or made to work hard, but this life felt different. He overheard a maid refer to him as the young prince, and that's when he realized he was a prince. Another maid, alone in the room with his mother, spoke honestly about her worries for his future. She mentioned his imperial blood, but also how difficult his life would be. The prince's life wasn't going to be easy. Our hero, in his tiny form, wiped away his mother's tears. He wanted to show her he wasn't sad, even if he couldn't inherit the throne. He didn't care about that. Being a prince was enough luck for him. He wouldn't let clingy nobles or the pressures of the imperial family bother him. His 101st life, a jubilee, in this new world felt like a dream. The Emperor's son and the former servants, even the half-bloods, were all starting anew. This life could be good, without being consumed by politics. He dreamt of eternal trips and hunting, of carefree fun and laughter, yet he lay in his bed, making baby sounds that brought joy to his mother. Even in his happiness she was a bit sad. She wished she could protect him from everything, making his life much better. Our hero heard these words of strength and pondered over them. He realized that having strength wouldn't harm anyone, but for him it had become a usual thing. He often felt like not having a rightful claim to the throne made him weak. He believed that if he was weak, no one would stand up for him or bother to protect him. He thought that people might even find a way to push him aside. Despite these thoughts, he held on to a different belief. He didn't consider himself worth worrying about because he had lived many lives as a warrior. 3 months later, while he was asleep and his mother woke him up, she noticed something incredible. His hair had transformed into a beautiful colour. A maid mentioned that the lady's carriage had already arrived. As everyone gathered, our hero felt a sense of joy. He had just experienced an exciting dream before being awakened. He hoped that the babysitter wouldn't rush to him immediately. Since he was a baby, there hadn't been a moment of peace, and he was tired of all the attention. While he was alone, he decided to check something crucial for his future. He hoped that the Emperor's blood carried some kind of ancestral power. If it did, he wanted to learn how to use it. He concentrated, gathering his power. He understood that strength ruled the world, and being strong meant no one would dare oppose you. Drawing from the experiences of his past lives, even within a child's body, he felt he could accumulate strength. He remembered his 30th life and the techniques he had learned. He decided to try practicing skills from his other lives simultaneously. He knew no one would expect a child to train this way. Even though he was just a child, he believed he could achieve great things. He was determined to train his body and spirit, making himself stronger. He thought about how he could train even when Nanny held him. He concentrated, letting energy flow through his body. The energy started to build up, and he could feel its power. As he focused, his head began to ache, and he decided to release the energy. He didn't want to attract any attention or lose his stored power. He hoped the babysitter would leave him alone and stop touching him. Finally, his prayers were answered when the babysitter left, thinking he was having nightmares. With the babysitter gone, he felt his energy surge to its maximum. He thought he just needed to sustain it, but he was feverish. He hoped that making such a baby could withstand it all, but the thought that it was better to die than to live in a weak body kept him from giving up. He began to store up as much energy as he could. He continued his work, for it was also so he could live a prosperous life. At this point he had called out. Even the maid heard it all. She suddenly ran to his room because she thought that something had happened. Our hero was sweating profusely. For some reason she even thought that he was sleeping, so she decided to prepare a bath with herbs and then bathe him. Our hero, on the other hand, when he saw what Tam had run off to prepare the bath, got to his feet abruptly, and his eyes shone with happiness, because everything worked. The maid came running back to him, asking him how he was doing. Forever carrying him in her arms, she praised him for every little success, and all he could think of was how lucky he was that Nanny hadn't noticed all. Using the mana concentration technique, he could now easily accumulate it in his body, and he didn't even need to do anything to do that because he got stronger even when he just ate or slept. He couldn't even contain a smile on his face, and everything would just explode with happiness. After all, he could already accumulate so much energy in 3 years that it would be comparable to most adults in power, and when he turned 10, it was hard to even imagine. He was sure that no one in this world could beat him, not even if he lived 100 lifetimes. At that moment, the maid noticed something strange, a sound coming from above. However, distracted again, she noticed that our hero had this wonderful smile on his face. At the same time, he was thinking that he would get stronger and stronger so that he would soon live like a king. He could not even wait for such a moment. He longed for that day to come as soon as possible. It had been exactly 5 months since he was born. Thanks to the mana absorption technique, his physical capabilities would greatly increase, and his inner energy would already be boiling faster than all his peers. After all, everyone should have known that mana is automatically collected. Even though he was now crawling on the floor, he still didn't stop trying because soon, for sure, his power would overtake the available one. However, at this point, for some reason, he began to rise from the carpet. It was just his mother who took him in her arms. She brought him a toy that he certainly couldn't have expected to see. He just couldn't take his eyes off of it, but on noticing his mother's disappointment, he immediately started playing with it. Even though he looked like he was having fun, inside, He felt the Spanish shame about what he was doing. The maid and mistress laughed, for their baby looked so happy. But in whom was he ever born so handsome? You couldn't say our hero didn't like it. He loved being praised, but even though he knew he was handsome like his mother, he didn't show that he didn't like playing as the joyful child. This time was too short and precious. Suddenly our hero's smile vanished. He wanted something specific, something to eat. Tears welled up in his eyes. Without words he conveyed his need, and in that moment the person with him understood. Quickly he was given milk. As he drank, the conversation shifted to money problems. Even though the prince needed nourishment, there was a shortage of funds. The mansion's budget had been cut. The mistress couldn't do much. It was tough even to care for one child. He remembered hearing the maids talk about saving rations, even suggesting that without it, no one would survive the season. Our hero was baffled. He thought this talk was a joke, but the mistress was serious. She said that even if she died, others would live. Someone suggested something, making him worry. If his mother, a concubine without power or status, couldn't get help, then what would happen to the prince? He couldn't believe it. Being a prince meant he wouldn't die young. But the mistress explained that seeing the king was nearly impossible due to his busy schedule. Our hero understood why his mother often left in a carriage. She wanted an audience with the king, but it seemed she wasn't successful. Even if the king was mean, treating the mother of his child that way was unfair. Why did he act like this? Maybe he was influenced by the noble's mistreatment of her. Our hero wondered what to do. Even if the king wasn't caring before, this was just too much. Tears streamed down our hero's cheeks, and as he cried, the nanny gently placed him into his mother's waiting hands. He was just a kid, but he really wanted to help his mum. The thought of doing something for her tugged at his heart. He sat there pondering, trying to come up with an idea. Winter was here and money was scarce. It wasn't just his needs. The cost of heating during the cold months added to their worries. He wondered, how can I help? What can I do? His young mind was determined to find a way. Then, like a spark in the darkness, an idea flickered. He remembered seeing his mom wearing precious gemstones. If those stones were so valuable, maybe he could find some too. But how? His legs were too short to venture outside. Another thought struck him. What if he could use his unique abilities? With a deep breath, he tapped into his power and felt himself lifting off. He could fly. His heart raced with anticipation. He knew that nobody had enough charcoal, and there was plenty in the fireplace. He had to be quick, his small hands reaching for the coal pile. But then, a new thought crossed his mind. He had to transform the coal into something valuable. Using his powers, he created heat and pressure, just like he had read about. He used up all his mana, pouring his energy into this task. He couldn't let the energy drain away. With each surge of energy, the coal transformed. It was a gamble, but he was determined to make his plan work. His mother's smile and happiness were all he cared about. The stove glowed, the temperature rising, and suddenly a dazzling diamond appeared amidst the flames. He had done it. He was sure it was just that the only thing left for him to do was to find a way to slip it in. He was glad that he had succeeded, so that the morning when Danny came to his room, he noticed it in my bed. She couldn't figure out how he got out of his bed, even though the bed was too high. Had our hero really spent all that night on the cold floor? She took him in her arms and noticed also that he was too dirty. It even seemed to her that it was because the palace had not been cleaned for a long time. They were very lucky that our hero had not frozen, and our hero thought that you needn't worry, for the most important thing is that his mother is all right. The babysitter noticed that our hero was holding something in his mouth. She asked what was in his mouth, for had he swallowed something. However, as soon as our hero opened his mouth, she saw he had a diamond. She did not know where he had found it, for had he really been lying on the floor? She could not understand it, because while you stubbornly she missed it, you could get a decent sum of money. She thought that just because of this they could get away, and for this not easy situation, she hugged our hero, saying that he was a real smart guy. It is most likely after this moment wagons with supplies poured into the palace. They received enough firewood to survive this winter, filled with groceries. In general, that very diamond was just at the most favourable price to cover 5 years of living expenses. But did they do the right thing? Because what if it belonged to someone that it simply could not be, for all the castle had been put up for nearly 100 years before the lady settled? Everyone thought it was a gift from God that was sent from heaven, for their prince mother was very happy, for she believed that it was, in fact, a gift from God. He would surely deliver her from all her worries. He imagined himself as an adult standing in front of his mother, but at that moment he was too young, for he had promised himself that he would open his eyes to everyone. It was thanks to all this diamond that the palace kept the fireplace warm all winter long. The mistress could not even eat most of the food alone, but the nannies told her not to think about anything because she just had to eat her fill. Everyone was glad to see them. Excitement filled the air as the new mates joined the group. The words that were once let go were now welcomed back, and the most important change was how our hero's mother transformed from sadness to radiance. Her beauty shined, and her smiles were endless. Time passed, and a year from that day, the babysitters picked out a fancy suit for our hero. While their choices were fine, Mama preferred more formal attire. Picking out clothes became a bit of a struggle. Our hero didn't quite fancy any of the options, and he really didn't like changing clothes. After all, what was the point of all this fuss? He wondered if they could just let him be, to have some peace. Maybe he could just lie down and let out his frustration. Bedtime came, and the soothing routines helped him drift into slumber. The idea of being left alone was comforting. Nanny, however, was excited. Today marked the official introduction of the prince to the imperial family. Our hero overheard this news and was taken aback. Was today really that significant? The mistress confirmed it. He needed to be recognized. Despite his imperfections, he was part of the royal bloodline. What a great reason for a birthday celebration. The anticipation grew. Everyone was getting ready for a grand feast in honor of our hero's special day. There was a buzz about His Majesty's appearance too. It seemed impossible for him to ignore the festivities forever. Reassurances began to calm any worries. Sometimes royal parents tried to distance themselves from their newborns, but this was different. Our hero was even more surprised. His birthday was really approaching so quickly. Would there truly be a grand banquet just for him? The mistress was elated. Her son was becoming an official part of the royal family. She knew that this was a significant step, and it filled her heart with joy. She was glad, for the laws of the empire were on her son's side. Errol, on the other hand, was anxious, very anxious, but smiling at the same time. This could not make him not happy, however, whether all the other aristocrats would attend this banquet. He even wished at last to see his father, whom he had not seen since his birth. At the banquet, however, there were an incredible number of aristocrats, as well as people who ran errands. Our hero was incredibly curious how much money had been spent on all this. After all, even in spite of all this, everyone was incredibly dressed up. Is that the way everyone dresses for banquets? It's not that our hero didn't like it all, but he was a little confused by the new faces, because the prince had never seen so many people. His mother began to calm him down because everything was good, because he was the most important there. But the aristocrats had already started to look at him obliquely, but he did not pay attention to them because no one needed them. This, and where was his emperor, who was his father? He just wanted to look into his shameless eyes, for he was the one who never showed his nose after making a child. But it was at this time that he realized he didn't have to worry about it, because he just had to know what he looked like in case there was an inheritance tour. But soon after the banquet began, these people did arrive, the imperial family. Our hero immediately began to pull on his mother's dress, asking her with all his appearance, was it really the acting empress and her children? Yes, with all his appearance, he showed that she was the empress, and her children looked like her. And in the middle stood the eldest, most of all. Why were they all so serious? Because they all passed by his mother as if she didn't exist. She was the empress, but it seemed like she wasn't seen, not by the rest of the royal family. Despite everything that had happened, our hero's mother didn't take offence at the piggish behaviour of the nobles. Instead, she turned to our hero, concern in her eyes, and asked if something was bothering him. She reassured him that things would get better soon. As she smiled at him, he noticed her gaze shift. Following her eyes, he saw his father, radiating an incredible energy, walking by. The chattering nobles and servants hushed immediately. Everyone bowed their heads before his father, and even our hero could sense the power emanating from him instinctively. Was it his father's gaze or his mother's that held that power? He wished he had the ability to read others' thoughts after his rebirth, but alas, he couldn't. It would have been so helpful. As time passed, people gave him presents, and congratulations poured in. It was an honor for everyone to be around him. When the imperial family themselves came to congratulate him, their open attitude toward him and his mother was evident. Amidst all this, our hero couldn't shake off a lingering feeling. He felt the need to confront the arrogance of those who treated him and his mother poorly. He realized that everyone around him was wearing a facade, hiding their true selves beneath. He contemplated whether he should expose their hypocrisy with a shout, but he didn't want to embarrass his mother. Instead, he decided that the best course of action was to maintain his goody-goody image. Hypocrisy seemed to be the norm, unfortunately, and he just wanted to escape it all. Exhaustion gnawed at him, and he longed to doze off in his mother's comforting arms. Just then, he noticed a girl. She appeared to be one of the emperor's concubine's daughters. Even at her young age, she held the title of mistress. However, the banquet eventually concluded. With the danger behind them, our hero and his mother let out a shared sigh of relief. But the story didn't stop there. The empress herself approached our hero's mother, praising their safe arrival. She credited her son, the heir to the throne, for their trouble-free journey. Our hero was puzzled, unsure why the empress would boast about her own son. Yet, as the empress continued speaking, it became clear that her intentions weren't purely complimentary. The empress spoke about how sweet and similar to his mother our hero was, but he didn't find much joy in her words. He suspected that she might have had a hand in their journey's success. The castle's finances hadn't suffered as much as expected, and the empress's sly smile as she departed only deepened his suspicions. The once grand castle now seemed to rely on desperate measures, like using knight's armour as firewood and dressing him in rags and scraps. Despite her veiled words, the empress wished our hero a long life and bid her farewell. It was then that the unexpected happened. The mistress of the castle spotted someone that left her stunned, the emperor himself. The emperor inquired if she had adjusted to life in the castle. She responded with a lie, a normal response given the circumstances. These words surprised our hero. He too desired just one thing, financial support from the emperor. Our hero's desires bubbled over, and he began to cry out to the emperor. His cries prompted the emperor to request to hold his son, a child he hadn't seen for a year. As the emperor's face came into view, the crying began, but not from our hero. While his siblings wailed uncontrollably, our hero simply smiled, his eyes lighting up with joy. This contrast intrigued the emperor. He found himself drawn to the child's happiness. The moment took a turn when our hero made a peculiar movement, urging the emperor to put him down. He wanted to walk, eager to showcase his newfound skill. Yet the mistress intervened, explaining that he was just a year old and not ready for walking. However, in a surprising twist, our hero defied expectations. He took off and began to walk, capturing everyone's attention. In that instant, it was clear he was the star of the evening. He was determined to display all he could do. The crowd, including the emperor, was enthralled as our hero took his very first steps. This unexpected feat even impressed the emperor, who realized that our hero was full of surprises. Our hero in turn understood that there is still a little bit left, because he will show him that he is definitely different from other children. He will show it in front of everyone. After all, he is the very same Prince Ariel. However, as soon as he came to the table and wanted to hold on to it, the whole table with the products just took and began to fall down. All the tablecloth, together with the drinks, also flew down. He was very worried because all the products began not just to fall to the floor, they just began to break, scatter and develop. But that's okay, because that's how it was meant to be. Everyone is so excited by the first steps of the prince that no one will notice that this is a well-planned strategy. He chose the right moment because that's exactly what he wanted, and also for a frightening effect. Just take it and shout. He is, after all, a child. While he was lying on the floor, he was picked up by the emperor, who asked to see him. He saw that our hero was only soiled in wine, but nothing more. He was in one piece and also needed to change him. The maid already wanted to take it from the emperor, but he asked to stand because she had torn off his outer clothing and noticed the terrible clothes that were under it. All better began to notice it, because why was the prince dressed in such bad clothes? What happened to her at all? However, the emperor asked everyone to be silent, for what kind of life was the mistress, as well as her son, that they live in such poor condition. But in fact, this morning, while he was being changed by the nanny, he concentrated all his energy and began to stretch the cloth as hard as he could. It gave in easily, so he had to give it a shabby look, which certainly wasn't difficult. If he had grown muscles, he would not have had to resort to magic, but the most important thing was that he was able to bear the uncomfortable truth. He was able to bring out what was hidden, so the emperor asked if the mother of our hero will not deign to explain how this could even happen. Is it so hard to live up to the status? Our hero's mother was very worried, so the emperor did not question her. There was no point. He turned to his man Jennifer and asked how much money is allocated for the maintenance of the castles of concubines at all, because why does this happen at your event? He said. However, he had given an excellent order to distribute the budget equally, and everything was carried out according to the order. The emperor could not understand what the word equally was at all. He also asked to bring the report, and as quickly as he could, our hero looked at this, and understood that his father was determined, and that he himself would look with pleasure at the figures that would be in the report. Our hero's mother wanted to say that a mistake had occurred, so he asked his little one back. However, it was our hero who realized that this chance was the only one for all of them. While everyone was in turmoil and the emperor's secretary handed him the documents, everyone understood what was about to happen. The emperor realized the situation, and he couldn't even believe it. He used his power to burn the given paper, surprising our hero. Our hero never thought the emperor wouldn't know everything. It seemed the empress was to blame. The emperor turned to her and asked what was wrong, noticing a hole in his predecessors' and concubines' allocations. The empress acted like she couldn't believe it. The emperor's face grew stern as he didn't know that budget distribution was her responsibility. The eldest son tried to defend his mother, speaking up. He said it was a misunderstanding, the empress wouldn't do such a thing. The emperor became even more serious, stating the leader was responsible for subordinates' mistakes. Her negligence left his younger brother hungry and cold. The older son glanced guiltily at our hero, who sensed he lacked the emperor's charisma and the empress's cunning. The emperor asked the eldest son if he meant to say his mother had no involvement. The emperor confronted the empress, expressing his deep disappointment. She claimed it was her fault, that she was wrong. The emperor was puzzled, asking what mistake. She mentioned giving birth to the emperor's child, believing it made her part of the imperial family. The empress blushed, and the emperor touched her hand, making her aware of her societal status. This upset the empress, and she wanted to find and punish the culprits. The emperor warned this wouldn't be tolerated. She promised to ensure it wouldn't happen again, but she still couldn't grasp his fury. The empress even approached and claimed she didn't know how it happened, struggling to justify herself to our hero's mother. Our hero realized she was pretending. While our hero's mother fretted and defended the empress, it was clear she wasn't entirely blameless. The protagonist was utterly baffled by his mother's actions. It seemed like the snake, who knew everything, was right in front of them. The empress vowed this wouldn't repeat, but only our hero grasped the need for a guilty look. Those women were just using their power. Then, his birthday wrapped up, and the budget hole got fixed. Not even the empress got involved. The real culprits, a minor aristocrat family, were swiftly found and executed. The servants chatted about the aristocrats admitting guilt, wondering how they'd spend all that money. Everyone was relieved things were sorted, yet our hero sensed the true culprit had escaped. The case closed. He mused that it was unfair, but when he grew up he'd show them. While stuck as a baby, he craved food. All he could do was cry. Now he was being spoon-fed, content with his baby life. He understood he'd be a baby a long while, but he resolved to eat, play, and work on his body. After a meal, he decided it was time for a nap. Enough time passed, and our hero woke up to the sound of a carriage pulling up to his house. Rubbing his eyes, he saw several people stepping out of the carriage. He squinted and realized he could see them better from up high, so he floated up to his window. His babysitter was fast asleep, unaware of the unfolding scene. He strained his ears and heard 3 sets of footsteps approaching his room. One was his mother's, and the others belonged to an adult and a child. Panic surged through him as he worried that if he woke up, everyone would see his extraordinary power. In a rush, he flew toward his babysitter, hoping to protect his secret. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.